Today, we're sisters Brenda and Elaine.
Welcome to the Body Wealth Podcast, a space for conversations about the wealth that really matters.
Your best health.
Today we have an episode that Brenda and I are really excited about. We're talking with my niece and her daughter, Lane.
I'm so happy to see how she's managed her anxiety, and I hope that some of the solutions she is using will be helpful to others. So let's hear what Lane has to say. Welcome, Lane. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Auntie Lane. Thank you for having me.
Yes, this is an extra special episode because Lane is my baby girl, and we really appreciate you being willing to come on our podcast.
Of course. I love your podcast. I'm so happy to help.
Thank you. We know you so well, but we should let you say what you'd like to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, I am Lane. I am 24. I'm turning 25 soon. I work in beauty for Fenty Beauty. I do product marketing, and I just moved from California to New York, so I'm excited to be back on the East Coast and closer to my family.
Yeah, we're excited for that too. Just a short train ride to DC. So, what has your experience been with anxiety?
Yeah, I feel like I've had quite the ride with anxiety. I feel like I first started experiencing anxiety when I was probably in high school. I feel like high school is the first time I can like tangibly remember it, which started with one, health anxiety, and two, I just had like a fear of failure. And so performance anxiety in terms of doing really well at school, impressing my parents, and just like succeeding at everything I did. And then I think over the years it has evolved and changed into like I had more health anxiety versus performance anxiety, or just anxiety about transitions and like moving across the country and not knowing anybody, and just different stages of my life. But at this point, I do think it's a lot more manageable than it has been in the past.
Do you ever feel like it was out of control?
Yeah, definitely. I think in 2020, it started to get out of control. And I think that was due to, I mean, obviously the pandemic and a number of things going on, but I had health issues the summer of 2020 that popped up, and I had already had health anxiety, and I ended up being hospitalized for a week. And I thought I was maybe fine because I got things checked at the doctors, and then that just wasn't the case. And so I think that kind of increased my distrust in people saying that, oh, it's okay.
I think that's a really important point because separate from the anxiety, you had gone to several doctors for the symptoms you were having, chest pain and things like that, and had been assured over and over again that it was fine. And then when you ended up going to the emergency room, it was a pretty serious situation. Do you feel
Yeah.
comfortable talking a bit about that? Or
Yeah, definitely. So basically, at the start of the summer, so maybe May 2020, I started experiencing chest pain, specifically on my right side. And so I went to the doctor. She listened to my lungs. She said everything sounded fine. We did an x-ray just in case, and my x-ray was clear. And so I had been working out every single day. And so she said, maybe it's just like a strained muscle. And so I went home. I put some ice on it. I thought things were fine. And over the course of the summer, it was still bothering me. And so I went back to the doctor and got another x-ray, and things were still quote unquote fine. And so I didn't really know what to do. She told me to take some Tylenol, and that was kind of the end of it. And then in August, things had gotten much worse. It got to the point where I like couldn't sleep. So there's like 3 days that I just couldn't really sleep at all because I couldn't lie down without being in probably the worst pain of my life. And so I was really stressed out, and I was like, something has to be wrong. And I was talking to my parents and Evan about it. Evan is my brother, and we thought that it really just must have been like a bad muscle tear. Maybe we were thinking kidney stones, and I just didn't know. And I wanted to go to the hospital, but it was obviously during the height of the pandemic. And if it was something that was less serious than I thought it was, we just didn't want to risk me getting like COVID by like going to the hospital. But then the next day, I started coughing up blood. I still like couldn't sleep at all, and so that is when we decided to go to the ER. When I got to the hospital, they knew right away. Like they did an MRI, and they saw a huge, basically abscess in my lung, which is a bacterial growth. And so I was admitted to the hospital and put on antibiotics, and then they gave me like extreme pain meds too. So that was a stressful a stressful situation, but that's good.
Yeah, that had to be very scary.
Yeah, it was. I also think because we were in the pandemic, no one was allowed to visit me, and so then I was just in the hospital for a week by myself, which was like the worst week of my life. But we survived, and I'm now getting fixed or like getting help with, and so that comforted me a bit. But I think after that, health anxiety that I had, which was fueled in the past from just being surrounded by cancer and just knowing a lot of people that were sick in my life, just got increased by the fact that I had an issue and I tried to check it out and everyone told me it was okay and it was not okay. And so now I just don't trust. Well, now I'm getting better. It's 3 years later, but there was a period of time that I just didn't trust anything. Or like if a doctor said, "Oh, like your labs look normal," I just didn't trust it.
So how does that inform how you both manage your health and interact with the healthcare system?
Yeah, it's tricky. And so I think I knew from the start, like I even told the doctor that this doesn't feel like a muscular issue. Like I knew that something else was going on. And so I think I just trust my instincts now. I know that not everything is cancer and it's not like I have a headache and all I have I have cancer or something, but I do my own research and I do think I am better now at pushing back or if something feels truly wrong, getting a second opinion or just making sure I'm covering all of my bases and doing the research before I go to the doctor so I know the right questions to ask.
So the health anxiety is better now, but right after this, obviously, the health anxiety was probably elevated. So how did that show up in your life?
Yeah, it was elevated. I feel like it was elevated honestly for probably over a year and a half, 2 years after that incident. I think it would cause me to have anxiety attacks. So if something I felt was wrong, or if I had, like, I feel like I got headaches and I would like start having a panic attack because I would be like, what's going on? I still had issues with my lung. So it was my right lung that had the abscess in it. And from time to time, it would start to hurt. And so then I would have anxiety attacks about, oh my gosh, is this abscess coming back or do I need to go back to the hospital? And so I think just checking as soon as I felt any sort of issue is what I started with. But in terms of anxiety attacks, I did get a therapist and I started working with her on ways to manage and ways to calm down. I think we focused on, what is fact and what is feeling. And so because I go to this place of something's wrong or like I'm going to need to stay in the hospital again or just the extremes, she was like, okay, well, you don't actually know that. Like, what are your symptoms? Could this be something else? Like, I think just making me pause for a second and think about what I'm feeling in a more logical way instead of just, going to the worst place imaginable was helpful. And that's something that she helped me through. And then I think I started like going on long walks and like exercising a lot more. And I started taking like vitamins that are supposed to help with anxiety. And so I did other things to kind of curb my mind. And like I would listen to like meditation music and just do things that could calm me and center me when I was feeling like out of control.
And did all of those things work? And do they work temporarily, or is it like an immediate improvement? How does it work for you?
Yeah, I think if I'm having an anxiety attack, which I haven't had in months, the most immediate thing for me is to like chew on an ice cube or you're supposed to like eat something sour or just make your taste buds think of something else or feel something cold. Um, and that kind of gets me out of the space of spiraling about whatever I'm thinking about. But I think in terms of long term solutions, going on my walks every day and making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm eating right, doing things to help my gut health. Like I started taking probiotics because gut health is directly tied to mental disorders such as anxiety, have helped me just feel better overall and manage not only my health anxiety, but just my anxiety about performance at work and making sure I'm doing good and just getting where I want to be.
So how did you figure out those tools to help you? I mean, did a therapist tell you those things?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just through my own research. I think my therapist helped me with specific tools whenever I'm having an anxiety attack, but I researched on my own. So I kind of realized that I need to get out. And I realized, especially during the pandemic, that whenever I took time to go on like an hour long walk or just do something that moved my body and get sunlight, I felt a lot better. And so that's kind of how I implemented that in my life. I think in terms of taking vitamins for anxiety, it was actually driven by TikTok, which I know like a lot of people don't love TikTok, and obviously you cannot trust everything that you hear on TikTok. But I do think it is an app that gives you easy access to a lot of credible experts in spaces, as long as you do your research.
Well, that's really good that you got some information, then you tested its credibility, then you tested it again. So I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that it works. But on TikTok, initially, how do you research whether someone you're watching, I guess it is credible or not?
I think you kind of have to like follow, like find them on Google, like find them on
Mm.
LinkedIn. I think they normally have their name in their bio. They might have like doctor or something or their certification or where they work. They link their Instagram, and so I feel like I'm not like a stalker, but like through
Mhm.
kind of sleuthing and going into their profile, then finding them on Google, you can see who is reputable and who is not.
And then how do you find your doctor that you trust?
I do it through recommendations. And so I have gotten some recs for good primary care physicians in New York. One through my cousin Nia, who I actually went to earlier this week. But I try and get recommendations of great Black women in whatever area I am in. And then I also read reviews from them separate from mutual friends referring, just to make sure that I feel good about who I'm going to. But you really never know. And I mean, one of the doctors I had in Oakland, I thought she was horrible. And I got recommended to her.
A lot of times it is trial and error, as you know, even if someone works well for someone else, they might not work well for you. I would imagine, especially with a therapist. So you do the same process, I imagine, when you're trying to find your therapist. And do you usually do that virtually, or do you do in-person therapy when you do that?
Yeah, I do it virtually. And the process with a therapist, especially because I'm looking for a Black therapist and they have to be licensed in the state that you're living in, is a little bit less through friend referrals. But I have used Black Girl Therapy, and that's really helped me. I filter for my area and my concerns, which is really just anxiety and life transitions. And then I look through a bunch of different ones. I read all of their bios, I go to their sites, I see their credentials, and then I set up multiple different consultations. So most therapists offer like a 15-minute free consultation where you can ask questions about kind of their approach to therapy and what they like to see in a patient and how they help set goals and whatever other questions you have. And then if I feel like I am a match with that therapist, if I feel like we have a good connection, if it seems like someone that I could have a good conversation with and could trust, then I would move forward. And so that's what I did in New York. I actually haven't had a therapist for the last year and a half, maybe, but I just got one last month to help with transitions.
Your mother and I obviously grew up together, and therapy was not something that we talked about growing up, or even thought to look for, especially in our 20s. So how did you determine that that's something that would be helpful for you?
I think it helped that I was part psychology major and I realized kind of the benefits of therapy. I think when I first started college, obviously I have pivoted quite a bit, but when I first started college, I wanted to be a therapist and help people. But I think it's kind of rooted for me in just wanting someone to talk to that is objective about a situation. And so I realized I wanted kind of like an objective third party that I could talk to about things that I'm struggling with. And I think your parents and your family and your friends, they have a tendency to hear you say something or worry about something and say, "Oh, it's going to be all right," or like, "You're so great, like everything's going to be fine," which I totally believe, and I so appreciate them for that. But I think sometimes it's more helpful for someone to hear you out and be like, okay, here are some solutions, or here are some steps that you can take to help you feel better internally about X, Y, and Z. And so that's kind of why I wanted to seek out a therapist.
I want to back up to high school because you said the first time you really recognized anxiety was in high school. And so, was there an event or environmental situation that you think triggered it? That's the first part of the question. And then, can you actually describe what it felt like those early days of anxiety?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there wasn't an event that triggered it. I think I mean, I went to a private school where I feel like a lot of the students were highly competitive, and I was also one of maybe seven black girls in my grade. And so I think that kind of drove me to want to do well or like not be seen a certain way and want to be liked and just realize I guess the feeling is just stress. um,
Mhm,
like if I
mhm.
have a test coming up or a volleyball game or basketball, I played a lot of sports. I would feel stressed of like, am I going to do well? Are people going to be proud of me? Are people going to like my performance? Just in my head about what other people think about me, I think, as well as wanting to get really good grades and wanting teachers to like me. And so
Mhm.
um, before any big event or exam, I would just feel really stressed. And then that would kind of launch me into over preparation. So I'd be studying all the time. I would try and like work on my spikes or something like that so that I could make sure that I did well. And so I don't think there was a specific event. I just think the environment I was in kind of drove me to want to do well, which I honestly think was a good thing because everyone was so driven, and that only helps you in life.
When Auntie Lane and I were growing up, we were also like the only black girl in our class. And at that time, I felt, let me just speak for myself. I remember in second grade, I had bad handwriting. And this kid in the class said, "Oh, I didn't know black people had bad handwriting." And I was like, because I have bad handwriting, that means all black people have bad handwriting. But I'm wondering, did you feel that?
I think I did feel that to some extent, only because again, most of my classes, I would be the only black person, and so I don't think it was pressure from anyone other than just me on myself. But I do think it's always in my mind, especially growing up in a predominantly white area and a predominantly white school, um, that this is what people see when they think of black, or
Mm.
like this is what the students in my class and my peers see. And so I want to make sure that I am perfect to an extent. And I think
Mhm.
in that way, I didn't even lean into my blackness as much as I should until I even got to college. And I feel like people would say, "Oh, like you talk white and this and that." And so I was like, "Okay, like," which is absolutely horrible. But I feel like I am very proud to be black, and I was proud to be black in high school too.
I think high school is a time everybody is trying to find their way to fit in, trying to find and being in that type of environment, being the only or one of a few just adds pressure to that for sure. Was there any physical manifestation of that anxiety? Did you get headaches, stomach problems, or was it, more just feeling stress?
No, luckily I didn't have any like physical manifestations. I feel like it was all stress. I do think like when I have anxiety attacks, it feels like I can't breathe, and so then I have to like really focus on my breath work and like try not to freak out. But in general, I didn't get headaches or stomach aches or anything like that. I do feel like maybe a bit of nausea. Like I feel like before exams, I would start to feel my stomach. Yeah, I guess my stomach would be like a bit upset. But I feel like it was more butterflies than anything, and like wanting to do well, than actually feeling like the anxiety is
Yeah.
making me in pain.
Can you describe what your breath work is?
um, yeah, so I think it can be multiple things. I feel like normally I would count from 10 down to 1 and just kind of remind myself that everything's okay. I think in terms of actual breath, there's times where I will breathe in for like 7 seconds, hold for like 5 seconds, and release for 3 seconds. And that tends to like calm me down just because it's a pattern that I have to focus on thinking about. I also think that something that my therapist taught me in like 2020 was to think about things in the room. So think about 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear. If there's anything that you can taste, like so, we would go through these patterns, and then anytime I was having an anxiety attack, I would say like, okay, like what can I see? What are their colors? What can I feel? Is there an ice cube or is there something I can eat to distract me? And that would really help. But I feel like in terms of breath work, I try and just breathe in, hold it, and then breathe out for a few minutes, and that calms me down.
That sounds like really good things to like bring you back into the moment. You know, like you can't be spinning out in your head when you're actually having to observe what colors are in this room. And I'm going to use that.
That's one of the things that brings me the most into the moment because I think even with breath work or calming myself down in my head, my mind still goes back to whatever I'm anxious
Mhm.
about. And so I think something tangible or like focusing on something else helps me the most, probably.
Do either one of you know whether anxiety is genetic? Because I feel like there's a lot of anxiety with the women in our family.
Yeah, it definitely runs in families. It's like similar to the way that depression does. And I do feel like a lot of the women in our family have anxiety.
Managing it is key, which you seem to have done well. Do you ever feel like um, anxiety has held you back from something?
No, which I have been grateful for. I think even though I get anxiety, my desire to do what I want to do kind of
You
outweighs
push
that, I
through it.
guess. And so, yeah, especially like with work, it's like if I want to get promoted, if I want to move up, you're gonna have to present things and get good at it. Same thing with school. If I wanted to graduate summa cum laude, which I did want to, you're just gonna have to keep studying and do well. And now I'm planning to go to grad school in a couple of years. And so it's like if I want to do that, yes, I'm anxious about taking the GRE, applying to schools. Where will I get in? Will I get money? But I'm gonna push through because that's something that I want to do. So it has not hindered me in any way, and I've learned to manage it. I also think, separate from all of the tactics that I use, I've just realized that some things just aren't that serious. And
Mm.
I think looking back, like getting an A in freshman year history class, like it's not that meaningful in the grand scheme of things. And I'm going to be all right no matter what. I feel like releasing perfection has been something that has been super helpful to me and realizing that everything is going to be fine no matter what.
So has that perspective sort of reduced the frequency of your anxiety attacks or the instances of you feeling anxious?
Yeah, definitely. I don't really have anxiety attacks at all anymore. When I
Great.
had them, they were really only tied to health anxiety, and luckily I feel fine right now. Um, but yeah, I think over the last couple of years, through therapy and just kind of with age, I guess, I've just
Age
realized
24.
I know Yeah, or like just growing up and kind of looking back on my high school experience, on my college experience, and seeing where I land. It's like I'm so anxious. I was so anxious about all of these things that seem inconsequential to me right now. Like I'm like I can't believe
Mhm.
I was so stressed about insert X thing, about finding a job after graduation, about what my life would be like moving to California with no friends or family, what my life is would be like moving to New York, and everything has always worked out. And so because of that, I think it's just unproductive to have a bunch of anxiety about things and being like, oh, I'm spiraling and I don't know what's going on and I don't have control because I'm a bit of a control freak. I know that just from past experience, it always works out, and I put in the work to make it work out, and so I don't need to be anxious about it.
Having gone through it does it teaches you lessons, and you've learned them very early, which is great. It's a beautiful thing to see you in this place right now in your life, thriving without anxiety. So if you all of a sudden were having a pain in a certain area and couldn't get it figured out, would that still give you an extreme amount of anxiety? And how would you handle that, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it would give me as much anxiety as it would have in the past. I do still think health anxiety affects me the most out of like any anxiety still. But I do trust the right doctors, and so I think if there was an issue, I have the support of my family, and I know how to research good doctors, and I can get one opinion, I can get a second opinion. I feel like I've gotten better at really describing my symptoms and describing what's wrong with me, in a way that I can make it come across. Oh, this is more serious than muscular. Like I can tell you, this is not muscular. Like I think I would now just continue to push on it in a way that makes me feel better, that I could like tackle any health issue that came up.
So I have this theory that I want to test with you because, I had cancer 3 times from when you were 13 to 18.
Yeah.
So that's like pretty formative years. And in my mind, I tried to make it not very disruptive to the family, but I mean, you had to notice. And so I'm wondering, do you feel like that contributed to your health anxiety?
Yeah, I do. I think that was probably the first thing that contributed because you were the first person that was close to me that had a health scare like that, and I feel like that gave me a lot of anxiety. I mean, not for my own health, but for the idea of like losing. Sorry, I don't like losing my mother. And so I feel like my health anxiety started there, where I was like, oh, like everything could be fine, and then all of a sudden, it couldn't be. And then from there, I think it stemmed to myself. And also like grandma, like you guys' mom had cancer when in 2017. I was in high school. Um, and so then I was like, okay, now it's like multiple people, and now it's also in the family. Granted, they didn't have any connection to each other, but I do think that is kind of what started me thinking about these more serious health problems in a way that I had never before. I do think it has prepared me now, and I feel kind of better about if something were to come along. Now I've seen multiple people between friends and family beat things, and I've seen how you handled it with grace and you stayed strong throughout everything. And so I feel like I know how to tackle any issues that come about, and it's not as scary to me just because I've been exposed to it.
We never know what's going to happen to any of us, but we know that we're all going to be there for each other.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
If you had a friend or someone else who in at the young age that you started struggling with anxiety, began having these struggles, what advice or what how would you counsel her?
I would tell her, which is honestly something that my mom told me too. She would be like, in 5, 10 years from now, you're gonna look back on this and realize that you were worrying for nothing, and like you can do your best, but you don't have to stress about the outcomes, or like get so anxious about outcomes that you can't necessarily control. It's okay if you're not perfect, and it's okay to release perfection.
I love it. Who or what inspires you to work towards your best health?
You guys do. I feel like having launched this incredible podcast and, listening to the stories and learning about ways that I can better serve myself and my health has been great inspiration. I think, Mom, like watching you work out with Lydia, like your personal trainer all the time, and she makes green smoothies every morning for those who don't know. And she has a garden and she eats really clean. And so I think that inspires me too, to really think about what I'm putting in my body. So both of you guys.
Oh, Lainey, this is great. I think this is going to be a great episode. It'll be so helpful to so many people, especially young people who sometimes you just power through anxiety, as I did, and don't realize that there's help out there. So for you to come talk about it and all the things you've done to help yourself, it's great. It's going to be inspiration to a lot of people.
Thank you. No, and I feel like that was me for a long time. I thought, oh, I have anxiety and I get stressed about everything, but that's just who I am. I feel like it wasn't maybe until college that I realized, no, there are actually tangible things I could do to reduce my anxiety and just live life feeling like I'm in control and I'm not stressed out and overthinking every situation. So it's been a great journey and I'm glad I am here now.
That's great. That's going to serve you for the rest of your life. That's really great that you figured it out so early.
It's always exciting to see your baby, our babies, being so grown up, so in charge of their lives. We're impressed with many of the young women that we've had on here, that they figured out some things early on in life that we probably didn't get to till a few decades later.
Or yesterday.
Exactly. So that's very exciting to me.
Yeah. And I also, both on the health front and on the anxiety front, I just love to see her, Lane, not just suffering, taking charge of whatever it is and figuring it out. So both multiple doctors saying, oh, nothing's wrong with your lungs, you're fine. But her saying, you know what, this does not feel right. I'm going to go to the ER and I'm going to figure it out. Or I don't like feeling these nauseous butterflies all the time when I've got a test or something come up. So I'm going to get a therapist and figure out how to deal with this anxiety. I mean, I love just not suffering or suffering in silence.
Thanks for listening. We hope this episode inspires you to increase your body wealth. If you like our show, please subscribe and tell a friend. For resources related to this topic, please see the show notes. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Body Wealth Sisters.
The Body Wealth Podcast shares personal stories to inspire you. It does not constitute medical advice. For that, we encourage you to work with a trusted healthcare provider. We also want to remind you that the views expressed by our guests are their own. This podcast is dedicated to our mother, Jean Fernandez Barbour, who showed us what advocating for yourself really looks like.